They fired me and then saw my farewell email to the team. It included a link to my new company's website, which was offering their top talent a 20% salary increase. Half the team was gone by Friday. They fired me on a Wednesday, not a Friday like a coward would do. No. They gave me the professional courtesy of being gutted midweek. Plenty of time left to pack up my dignity between meetings and half a stale bagel from the break room. I just finished fixing a pipeline issue that would have taken their new golden boy 3 days and 2 panic attacks. I didn't even get a thank you. Just a meeting request from HR titled Touchpoint. That's code for about to remove you like a browser extension. So there I was, still logged into Jenkins, watching the logs roll like a war vet watches the battlefield when Karen from HR slithered in with her pastel cardigan and crocodile smile. "It's not performance related," she cooed. "It's just budget realignment." Budget my ass. I saved that company more money than their outsourced CFO with his gluten-free spreadsheets. I built their DevOps from nothing, literally nothing. When I started, they were deploying with a manual checklist and hope. I was the duct tape and caffeine keeping the whole circus running. But, sure, let's call it realignment. And just in case you're one of the 97 of folks who've been riding shotgun on these confessionals without hitting that little subscribe button, do me a favor and smash it like you're slapping a broken vending machine. I'm trying to hit my first 10,000 subscribers, and frankly, it's cheaper than therapy. Back to the crime scene. 7 years of eating stress for breakfast, lunch, and unpaid dinner. You know how many all-nighters I pulled when production broke? More than I've had birthdays. I mentored the new hires, debugged code that looked like it was written by a raccoon on meth, and automated half the processes that used to take 3 engineers and a bottle of Tums. And still, every time someone asked how things just work, that VP would puff out his chest like a peacock in a Patagonia vest and say something like, "That's the magic of synergy." I was the goddamn synergy, buddy. Then came Mr. Disruption himself, new VP straight out of LinkedIn hell. His name was Brent. Of course, it was. Brent had a face like an overpriced dating app ad and the soul of a sentient Word doc. First weekend, he called a meeting just to say, "Let's pivot our culture into an agile forward growth mindset." I wanted to pivot my fist into a drywall. He asked why we were using Terraform instead of some shiny SAS solution with a 12-syllable name that didn't even do versioning. I told him because it works. He said, "That's not visionary." I said, "Neither is hiring a guy who can't spell YAML." Still, I played nice. I taught his efficiency consultants how our deployment cycle actually worked. I even made him a damn infographic. You'd think after all that, it'd be a shred of respect, a nod, a hallway good job. Hell, I'd take a lukewarm coffee and a clean mug. Instead, I get the budget axe while Brent spends $20K on a leadership offsite where they drink kombucha and pretend trust falls aren't a metaphor for his management style. The part that really singed my nerves was how quiet it all was. No one stood up. No one said anything because they couldn't because I'd been holding the seams together so long. Forgot there were seams. They thought uptime was a law of nature, not something I fought tooth and nail to preserve while their servers wheezed like an asthmatic pug. So I went home, sat on my crusty IKEA couch, didn't even turn on the TV, just stared at the ceiling while my cat judged me from the bookshelf. And somewhere between the grief and the rage, I remembered something. I wasn't just a cog. I was the whole damn gear factory. And 4 months ago, before Brent ever darkened our door, I started sketching out something on my own, something lean, something clean, something mine. And now I had nothing left to lose but the chains that kept me fixing their messes. They called it a quick sync. I clicked the calendar invite thinking it was just another useless status update. Maybe Karen wanted to circle back on some compliance docs or needed help resetting her printer again because she kept feeding it paper like it was a hungry pet. But when I stepped into the Zoom and saw both Karen and Brent in matching forced smile formation, I knew my gut dropped like a misconfigured cron job. They didn't even pretend. Karen cleared her throat. Brent leaned forward like a weasel auditioning for empathy. "Hey. So as part of our ongoing efforts to stay lean and scalable, we've had to make some tough calls around budget optimization." Budget optimization, that was the phrase. Like I was an old server rack they were scrapping for parts. Karen nodded like a bobblehead. "This isn't a reflection of your performance, obviously. You've been essential. But you know we're aligning resources with our strategic vision. Translation, you're too smart, too respected. Brent feels threatened by anyone who doesn't buy his bullshit." I said nothing. Didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't even blink. I went full dead-eyed Barbie, polite, vacant, and murderously calm. "Thank you for the clarity," I said. "Is there anything else you need from me before I offboard?" They looked almost disappointed. I didn't beg. Like, they expected me to plead for job I outgrew 3 years ago. Brent mumbled something about handover docs, which was cute, considering I was the reason half the docs existed in the first place. Karen dropped the severance terms like she was announcing a prize on Wheel of Fortune, 2 weeks' pay, a generic letter of recommendation, and a LinkedIn endorsement so bland it might as well have been written by ChatGPT with a corporate muzzle on. I logged off, closed my laptop, and sat in silence. You'd think after all the overtime, the weekends, early mornings I spent nursing Jenkins like a hungover toddler that I'd feel shattered, but all I felt was clarity. Something cracked open inside me. Not like glass breaking, more like the click of a lock finally releasing. No more waiting for respect that was never coming. No more translating Brent's brain farts into action plans. No more being the safety net for their digital tightrope act. I opened my personal laptop, pulled up the GitHub repo I hadn't touched in weeks. The one labeled with the joke folder name, Burn the Ships. Inside, a skeleton of the platform I'd been dreaming up since last year. A DevOps hub built for real people. Streamlined, ethical, no VC parasites, no 10 layers of pointless meetings. I'd been playing with the code on nights when I had just enough rage to fuel my fingers. Back then, it was a fantasy. A what if now? It was my escape pod. I dusted it off like a weapon pulled from beneath the floorboards. The lines of code stared back at me half-broken but full of promise. I cracked my knuckles, opened versus code, and whispered the dumbest thing I've ever said aloud. Let's damn go. Because when they stripped me of my title, they freed me from their leash. They thought they were ending something. Nah. They started something. For a hot minute, I almost did what they expected, applied for a few jobs, brushed up the all resume, polished it until it gleamed like a showroom car I couldn't afford, seasoned DevOps leader with 10+ years experience, blah blah blah. Added buzzwords I hated, like synergistic delivery frameworks and growth-focused automation culture, because apparently recruiters love it when you sound like you've been lobotomized by a TED talk. I slapped on a blazer I hadn't worn since pre-COVID, stepped into a glass fishbowl co-working space downtown, and smiled through an interview where a CTO 10 years younger than me explained what DevOps really means, like I hadn't been doing it since he was microwaving Hot Pockets in his college dorm. After the third interview, I went home and cried in my car. Not because I was sad, because I felt fake. Like I was wearing someone else's skin. I didn't want to build someone else's empire just to get kicked out when it became too efficient. Every time I opened LinkedIn, it felt like scrolling a memorial for authenticity. Former coworkers shilling crypto jobs, engineers lying about loving Kubernetes, and HR girls posting inspirational quotes about resilience next to selfies with ring lights. Meanwhile, I was choking on rage-flavored air, trying not to punch my laptop every time I got a rejection email addressed to Dear Applicant. The bitterness stuck like gum under a server rack, and it wasn't just about the job, it was about them. The way Brent had smiled when I left, like he'd won, like he thought he'd erased me. They had no clue how deep I ran, how many systems still bore my fingerprints, how many fires I had put out while they were busy workshopping slide decks about workflow empowerment. And one night, I got a message. It was from Maya, a junior engineer I'd mentored. She used to hover behind my desk with a notepad full of scribbles and questions. I taught her how to script her first deployment, how to survive office politics, how to breathe through a prod outage without losing your soul. Her message was short. Just one line. I don't want to stay here without you. That hit harder than any layoff ever could. I read it 5 times. The screen blurred. I hadn't cried when they fired me, but I cried then because it meant I mattered, not just to the codebase, not just to the uptime metrics, but to people. Maybe I wasn't redundant. Maybe I'd been the backbone this whole damn time. And for the first time in weeks, the rage melted into something else. Pride, the quiet, stubborn kind that starts in your gut and grows claws. Maybe I wasn't done. Maybe I'd let them convince me I was just a background process. But in reality, I'd been the root user all along. I closed the job boards, closed the rejection emails, shut the lid on my safe path, then I opened the repo again. I didn't need permission anymore. I had a mission. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to do it alone. It started with a whiskey and an old contact I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Brent would have called it networking. I called it damage control with ice cubes. The old contact's name was Ron Devine, a last name like it sounds kind of guy. I'd helped him out years ago when his e-commerce startup was being slowly strangled by their DevOps vendor. I'd spent one hellish weekend untangling their spaghetti deployment pipeline, got them stable, and billed less than half my usual rate. Because back then, I was loyal. Back then, I thought goodwill would be returned. Turns out it was. Met in a booth at a dive bar that served burnt wings and dreams on draft. I pitched the idea between sips, not with any performative startup flair, just the bones of it. Simple, lean, Brutally efficient. A DevOps platform designed for actual humans. Clean UI, real automation, zero fluff, no gamification, no microtransaction bullshit, no inflated job titles like Code Happiness Officer. Ron didn't blink. He just nodded slow and said, "How much do you need to get it off the ground?" I gave him the number, modest. Survival mode bootstrapping, really? He chuckled and said, "Double that. You'll burn twice as fast as you think." The next morning, the wire hit my account like a jolt of adrenaline. That same afternoon, I texted Mel, an old college roommate turned lawyer who specialized in startups and occasionally threatened to sue guys on Tinder for fun. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I opened with, "Hey. I need to incorporate a company before I accidentally go full vigilante. You in?" Mel called me within 5 minutes and said, "Send me your docs. You're not getting sued on my watch." She didn't charge me for the first batch of paperwork, said it was her way of flipping off corporate bro culture. I love her. Over the next 72 hours, I barely slept. I spun up the server, registered the domain, and built the bones of the site, Fair Deployo, a place that wasn't just a careers page, but a mission statement. The tagline said, "No politics, no posturing, just clean deployments and good humans." I handwrote every job listing. Didn't bother with recruiter fluff or culture fit nonsense. Just straight talk. No unpaid overtime. No micromanagers named Brent. No useless meetings. 20% above industry average because you're worth it. I targeted every pain point I remembered. Lack of mentorship, burnout disguised as hustle, being spoken over in meetings by men who just read Sapiens and thought they were philosophers. I knew what pissed people off because I'd lived it, and I knew what they needed because I had given it. Every font choice, every button color, every line of copy, it all came from a place of precision, not performance. I wasn't building a startup. I was building an exit for every burned-out engineer too tired to write their own. By the end of the week, the back end was stable, the front end was slick, and the careers page glowed like a bat signal. All that was left was one final integration, my farewell email, but that was a trap I'd set for another day. For now, I stared at the screen and let it settle in. This was real. No bosses. No Brent. No glass ceiling dressed up in feedback loops. Just me. I teamed to be and a website ready to flip the whole damn script. The office was already forgetting me before I was even gone. My last day didn't come with a send-off. No cupcakes. No signatures on a farewell card. Not even a "will miss you" Slack emoji. Just silence and the subtle whiff of people pretending they didn't see me packing up my monitor arm and whiteboard markers. Brent passed me in the hallway and gave me a smile like a guy who just found $5 in a pair of pants he didn't earn. I logged out of my work account at exactly 5 p.m. Not a second early. Not a second late. Clinical, surgical. I left behind a clean handoff document knowing full damn well they'd never read it. Scripts in place. Documentation tagged. Keys revoked. My final commit pushed with a message that simply said, "good luck." Then I walked out of that building for the last time. Hands in my jacket pockets, wind in my face like the universe whispering, "Now it's your turn." At home, I cracked open my laptop, took a breath, and opened the draft. Subject, "Thank you." It was short, measured, not a single drop of venom. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone I had the chance to work with these last 7 years. I've learned so much from all of you about resilience, about grace under pressure, and about what real teamwork looks like. If you ever want to collaborate again, I'd love to stay in touch. I'm working on a new project, something small but growing fast. We're hiring if you're curious. Fair Deployo/career. Simple, gentle, nuclear. I stared at that paragraph like it might detonate if I hit schedule. My hand hovered over the button. Heart thumping like a warning bell. Because once this went out, the fuse was lit. There would be no taking it back. No pretending I just moved on. This wasn't revenge. It was an invitation, but one they'd read like a threat. And maybe it was a threat to the culture that pushed people out quietly and expected them to stay quiet. A threat to the Brents of the world who thought respect was optional and loyalty was disposable. A threat to the narrative that said I was just another cog, when really I was the damn watchmaker. I click send later, scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, right as they'd be sipping their office brew tar pretending it's artisanal. The moment the email was scheduled, I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. My chest was tight, not from fear, not even from pride, but from readiness. Like standing on a rooftop right before the jump. O's over the edge, wind in your teeth, knowing there's no more hesitation left to burn. Let them read it. Let them feel the shift in the air. Tomorrow, everything changes. The morning my email went out, I slept in. No alarm. No calendar pings. Just me, my cat, and a smug sense of liberation that tasted better than any office coffee ever brewed. I rolled over around 9:20 a.m., cracked open my phone, and braced myself. At first, nothing. No notifications. No DMs. Not even a good luck from the handful of people I thought might say something. My stomach dropped just a little. Maybe I'd overplayed my hand. Maybe they really had moved on without blinking. Maybe 7 years of blood and brainpower had been just another disposable asset in a company PowerPoint. But then, like a drip from a leaky faucet, the first Slack ping: Maya, the junior I mentored, fair deploy is you sneaky legend. Just applied, I told Daniel too. We're both kinda done. Ping ping wait. Is this real? 20% more and fewer stand-ups. Are you hiring or starting a cult? Tell me the part where I don't have to sit through another Brent Vision Board meeting and I'm in. I laughed out loud. Alone in my kitchen with half a bagel in one hand and a tide of vindication rising in my chest. One message turned into 5 into 12, most just testing the waters. But by Thursday at lunch, I got the messages from 3 separate engineers I respected, one of whom I didn't think even liked me when we worked together. Hey! Just gave notice. Hope that job listings still live. Brent just asked me what infrastructure as code means. That was the final straw. Applied. Sign the offer. I start Monday. I'm free. That word hit different. And the best part, I hadn't asked them to leave. I'd given them the door, and they'd walk through it on their own. No coercion. No pitch decks. Just a quiet, gentle offer to do something better. Meanwhile, inside the old fortress, the walls were cracking. My LinkedIn lit up like a Christmas tree. People I hadn't spoken to in years were liking the email screen grab someone had anonymously shared in a private industry. Brent must have felt the tremor because by Thursday evening, I got a screenshot from an insider. VP Brent and #General. Hey, team. Let's all hop on a quick sync tomorrow to talk about retention strategy and alignment moving forward. Desperate. HR started booking one-on-one wellness check-ins. They'd never once checked on our mental health before, but suddenly, everyone was a priority. Another insider messaged, it's like rats on a sinking ship. People are scared to even open their mouths in meetings now. Brent sweating through his undershirt. I didn't reply. I didn't gloat. I didn't even celebrate publicly. That wasn't the point. I wasn't trying to torch anything. I was building a lifeboat. The fact that it was floating while theirs was taking on water, that was just physics. Still, I stayed cautious. This wasn't over. Brent was the type to retaliate when wounded. He'd spin the story if he could, try to make it seem like I'd poached or manipulated. That's the beauty of quiet rebellion. You don't need to swing when gravity's already doing the work. So I made tea, sat on my porch, watched the sunset while Slack pings kept coming. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. Saturday morning, I was in sweats halfway through folding laundry that had lived in the basket for 3 days when my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn alert. I almost ignored it, thought it was just another congrats on your work anniversary from some bot in a suit, but something about the subject line made me pause. New job posting, Senior Dev Ops Lead Denver, co $240K/year plus sign on. I blinked $240K. That was double what they'd paid me. Double for the same job, same title, same description. They even listed my old responsibilities like it was a checklist they'd yanked from my original onboarding doc. Only now it came with a sign-on bonus and relocation perks. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, towel still in my hand. The audacity wasn't even what stunned me. It was the desperation. They didn't value the role until they saw what happened when I left, until they realized no one knew how to read the logs I trained the team on. No one could explain why certain scripts had 5 layers of do this logic buried like digital landmines. They thought they'd replaced me with a line item. Now they were trying to fill the vacuum with a bag of money, and I wasn't the only one who saw it. About an hour later, my phone rang. It was Jess, one of the PMs from the old job. She always played things safe, always stayed out of the politics. We hadn't talked since the layoff. She opened with no greeting, no pleasantries. You lit a fire over here. They're in full panic. I smiled. Brent pulled us into an all-hands yesterday. Called it a mission realignment moment. He was visibly sweating. HR's drafting counter-offers. And get this, he had the gall to say, we want to make this the kind of place people choose to stay. Like, you didn't already try to do that for years. There was a pause. Honestly, it feels good to watch it burn, but it also feels sad that they couldn't see it until it was gone. We talked for 50 minutes. Nothing gossipy. Just facts, timeline stuff, quiet tension. Then she said almost in a whisper, I wish I'd left with you. That one stuck with me. Because while Brent was flailing around in panic mode trying to plug a hole with money, I was staring at my dashboard and it was glowing. 47 applications had come in since Thursday. Not just resumes, but messages. Heartfelt, frustrated, raw. I've been looking for something like this for years. I'm burned out. Your mission feels human. This is real. I'm in. I read every single one. Some were from people I knew. Some were from engineers I'd never met but had watched my career from afar. One applicant even said, "I followed your Jenkins talks at Dev West. You were the first person who made me feel like I wasn't dumb for needing to Google things." That one got me choked up because somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing my own impact. Brent had turned my name into a line on a budget report, and I let that weigh heavier than the dozens of people whose careers I'd helped launch. But now I could feel it, the tide shifting. The quiet uprising taking form, not in fire and fury, but in resignation letters and job applications written at 2 a.m. by people who finally saw a way out. And yet, there was a strange weight pressing down on me, a quiet ethical tension. I hadn't poached. I hadn't made any promises. I hadn't even sent personal invites. But I'd built the door, propped it open, and hung a sign that said "Better Lives This Way." Was that manipulation, or was it redemption? I didn't have the answer. All I knew was this. I would never build a company like the one I left. If people came to Fair Deploy, it would be because they believed in what we were doing, not because I weaponized their pain. So I poured another coffee, opened up the admin panel, and started going through the applications, name by name. Story by story. Not as a recruiter, as a builder. And this time, I was laying bricks that wouldn't collapse under someone else's ego. The subject line read, "Reconcerning professional conduct, Brent." Of course, it was Brent. I stared at the email header for a good 10 seconds before even opening it, already imagining the clenched teeth behind his keyboard, the vein probably throbbing in his temple like a Windows update stuck at 99%. He'd waited a whole week. Let the fire spread. Watch the exits fill. And now, like a kid losing a board game, he'd finally decided to flip the table. The body of the email was worse than expected, passive-aggressive corporate poetry. "It has come to my attention that several of our team members have recently resigned, many citing opportunities at your newly launched venture. While I respect your right to pursue independent initiatives, I do hope you understand how these developments could be interpreted as active solicitation and deliberate disruption." He didn't accuse me directly, of course. That would require spine, but the insinuation was there. Dressed in lawyer-safe language, camouflaged under a digital smile, I read it twice. Then a third time, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could have fired back. Could have buried him in receipts. Instead, I opened a folder I'd labeled months ago. During one of the many nights, I considered walking out for good. A quiet insurance policy. Inside, screenshots, 4 LinkedIn messages from me to Brent spaced out over 6 months. Each one polite, professional, trying to flag burnout on the team, asking for real investment in the DevOps process. One even suggested a restructuring that would have given us better coverage and more growth opportunities for junior staff. Every single message left unread. I pulled them together into a single PDF. No commentary. No monologue. Just the facts. I drafted my reply. "Hi, Brent. Appreciate you reaching out. I want to clarify that I've not directly recruited or approached any of our former colleagues. I've simply made opportunities available publicly, and it seems some of them found those options more aligned with their values and career goals. For your records, I'm attaching several messages I sent during my tenure, efforts to improve team health and retention strategy. I hope they're helpful in your continued pursuit of a stable and empowered engineering culture. Wishing you all the best." I hit send. No threats. No flex. Just truth with teeth. I closed the tab and took a long, quiet breath. It didn't feel triumphant, not exactly. More like a full exhale after holding your breath underwater for too long. And then, as if the universe wanted to frost the cake, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Devin, the senior developer who joined Fair Deploy 3 days earlier. Smart, scrappy, quiet type. One of the few I never expected to leave the mothership. He wrote, "Just got verbal from one of our old clients. They're coming with me. Wants to migrate their whole ops stack over to us. Budget is $300K. I reread it. Jaw slack. Heart doing something between a skip and a sprint. 300,000. Brent didn't just lose talent. He was about to lose business. A client I'd once onboarded personally who'd been ignored for months after I left was now walking right into our shop, ready to pay for the kind of attention and clarity they never got over there. I didn't reply to Devin right away. I just sat with it. The weight of it. The full arc of everything. How quiet decisions made in the shadows were now echoing like thunder through boardrooms I no longer had to enter. No need to gloat. No need to shout. My silence backed by receipts, revenue, and the loyalty of those who saw the truth long before the panic started that said everything. Friday morning, my phone started vibrating before sunrise. First buzz, a Slack ping from Maya. 3 more devs gave notice. They didn't even wait for their counteroffers. Second buzz, a forwarded email from someone still deep in the trenches. Subject line, exit interview schedule urgent by 8 a.m. I had 7 notifications from 7 different people, 7 resignations, 1 day, all citing better opportunities or alignment with long-term goals. Corporate speak that screamed I'm out because of you. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just breathed deep and slow, like my lungs had finally remembered how to function. Then came the screenshot, an anonymous leak from an internal team chat, time-stamped. Brent's name at the top. Brent, does anyone know how to deploy without her scripts? No response. Brent, did she leave documentation? Still silence. Random engineer. She did. No one ever read it. That one made me snort into my coffee. They had the keys. They just never learned how to drive because while they were busy scrambling to manage, I'd been quietly leading. Building a system not just of code, but of trust, resilience, and clarity. And now that I was gone, they weren't missing a dev. They were missing a North Star. I opened the back end of Fair Deploy. Checked the hiring dashboard, 11 new applications, 3 from former project managers, 1 from a lead QA I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. They were coming, not because I begged, not because I bribed, but because I'd opened a door they never thought would exist. I sipped my coffee, dark roast, no sugar. Just the right amount of bitter. Clicked into the hiring page editor. Scrolled to the top. There under the hero image of a clean command line terminal and a simple headline, real work, real people, real pay. I added one more line, welcome aboard team. That was it. No press release. No confetti. No dramatic exit stage left. Just a slow collapse in the rearview mirror and a steady build ahead. They lit the match when they called me redundant. I just happened to have the kindling and enough quiet rage to architect the exit route for everyone else stuck behind. No revenge, no war, just options. And when you've spent years watching talent get suffocated by ego and neglect, giving them a way out isn't vengeance. It's justice in plain text. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.